Welcome everybody. Great.
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Welcome everybody. This is Mark from Sunrise Systems. I'm going to be conducting today's webinar. I have Chris Voss from the ECA on the line as well too, so I will let him introduce everybody to the system and then we'll get started here.
Hi everybody, this is Chris Voss. I want to start by just pointing out that we did send a GovConnect notice out this morning. So if you haven't seen it yet, this applies to you in particular. The program, the webinar, is about an hour and 10 minutes long. The certification unit has approved it for 1 hour, 1 contact hour for CEUs, for municipal clerks in the category of records. This is actually the first time we've done this internally, so we were trying to figure out how to assure ourselves that attendees are actually like sitting in front of the monitor and participating. So at 3 points during the program, I'm going to announce 3 separate code words. Jot them down if you want the 1 credit hour. When you apply for that credit hour, you'll do that using the individual continuing education agreement. It's on our website. It's the form that you would use if you attended a seminar, let's say in Pennsylvania or Florida or wherever, and although it wasn't approved for in advance for credits from us, you could always apply for that type of credit. So you're going to use that form. It's on our website, and you're going to include those 3 code words on that form when you submit it. The code words change from webinar to webinar, and it's important that you have all 3, because if the certification unit only sees 1 or 2 or none, they won't approve you for the 1 credit hour. Since it's already after the top of the hour, we're going to announce that the first code word is Phoenix, like the city, P-H-O-E-N-I-X, Phoenix. And in like another 20 minutes or a half hour, we'll give you the 2nd code word, and at the end we'll give you the 3rd code word. Mark from our vendor is going to take over for the most part the demonstration. We did get a lot of questions in the first session, so I guess we'll try to answer those as we go along. Mark will explain how that process will work in a little bit more detail, and I'll try to chime in when I can. I had the benefit of Mark being in my office this morning, so I was able to like read his face, so to speak, and he could read mine, but we're in different locations now, so we'll try not to step all over each other. Thanks, Mark. Mark, you can go ahead.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Okay, yeah, so just to let everybody know how this will work, you won't be able to talk online to me or through the phone to the speaker. Any questions that you need to ask on the panel, the webinar panel that came up in the lower right-hand corner, there'll be a section, a chat section. You might have to expand that, click on the arrow, but that's where you can go, or you can just click on to, ask a question at any point in time, and, send your questions over. What we'll try to do is that a couple of times through the webinar, we'll try to stop and pause and answer those questions for you, at that particular point. So as we go through, there's probably 3 different sections we cover as we're going through this. So at each stop there, we'll go through and we'll answer the questions. Either I'll answer them directly, or we'll refer them over to Chris to answer. There might be a couple questions that come up like that happened this morning that we didn't exactly, or Chris didn't have the answer right then and there. We'll just probably ask you to get, your name and what, what entity you're from, and we'll get back to you, after the fact to answer that question. So just to make sure that everybody can hear me, and then I'll get started, if somebody can just respond in the chat section and just say yes if they can hear me, so I know that we're fine and we can get going here. So, and I'll just wait for them to come in. Let's see here. Yep, okay, good. Okay, that's good. Nobody else, that's fine. We got it. Okay. Just want to make sure, because I did one of these one time a long time ago, and I think I was like 10 or 15 minutes into it, and finally somebody told me that they couldn't hear me, so I had to kind of start all over again. So, okay, so good. So everybody kind of knows how to use the chat there and ask your questions and so on and so forth. So let's get started here. Everybody should be seeing my screen. This is going to be the login screen that everybody will come to. meaning yourself and the other participants in the system. So I'm going to just go over a few terms that I utilize throughout the webinar today if you're not familiar with them already. And they're pretty much acronyms. If I mention the word or the letters LGS, it means I'm referring to local government services or the DCA. If I mention LGE, that would be yourself, so that's the local government entity who will be managing that part of the system. And then the LGOs, which are the local government officials, will be the participants that need to file their financial disclosure statements or their FDS. So that's some of the acronyms that I use as I go through today's session. Whether you're an LGS, an LGE, or an LGO, everybody will access the system the same way through this login screen. Our system is a web-based system, so as long as you have a computer with internet access, you'll be able to get to the system. Right now, we're going to be working in the test system. When the system goes live, which we're expecting within the next 2 weeks or so, you will be given the webinar or the URL for the live system, and at that point in time, you'll be provided from the DCA with your credentials. And we'll talk a little bit about that as we go through the session here, as we start to get started here, what those mean and so on and so forth. So, so let's get started. So what will happen is, right now we are working with the DCA to get everybody's credentials set up within the system, and like I said, the DCA at some point over the next few weeks will be relaying those credentials to you. Mainly it's going to be your email address and initially a temporary password to get into the system. What we're going to ask, and I'm going to show you this in a few seconds, is that when you first get into the system, we're going to ask that you change that temporary password to a password that's more user-friendly to yourself. Plus, from a security standpoint, we want people to make sure that their password gets changed. So, what I'm going to do here is one thing I will touch on before I actually log in is at any point in time, if you do forget your password, we do have a link right here on the home page or on the login screen that says forget password. If you click on that and you enter then in when the next screen comes up, you enter in your email address. As long as you have a valid email address that's been registered in the system and you click on get password, that password will be sent to that email address. If for some reason that email address is not a valid email address, like if I typed in mark1111, at sunrisesys.com, and I go get password, what will happen is you'll get a message in red that says the given email ID is not registered in the system. So it means that particular email address is not listed in the system. If there is a valid email address there, right, so if I type in my valid email address, okay, and I hit get password, what will happen is then the system, will tell you that a password has been emailed to that email address up at the top here, right here, okay? So again, if you forget your password at any point in time, that's how you would actually go ahead and retrieve your password. So let me log into the system. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to log in as an LGE or, local government entity, and that could be municipal clerk, it can be an authority, it could be a college, whatever. You're going to be the ones who are actually kind of initially starting the process of, this whole new system. So let me log in, and I'm logging in right now as a basically as a municipal clerk for Edison Township. So let me come in here, log in. And once I log in, I'm going to come to my home screen that's listed right here. And you'll see 3 icons on this home screen. You'll see something that says Manage LGO Roster. That's what we're going to get to in a little bit. You'll see a Reports icon, and then you'll see an Edit Local Government Entity Profile. This is where I would like you to first come in or go to when you first get into the system with that username and temporary password that's going to be assigned to you, to come in here and change that information, okay? Mainly down here in this section, the second section where it says password, what you would need to do is clear out these 2 fields, the password field and the confirm password field, and then come in here and put in your new password. You will, however, have to follow the guidelines that have been listed there, which means is the password needs to be between 8 and 16 characters in length. It needs to contain at least 1 letter and 1 number, okay? Once you do that and you enter them in, you click on the Save button at the bottom of the screen, And then what will happen is up at the top, you're going to get, you're basically going to get a message in right up here. I'll just circle it in green, okay, letting you know that that operation was successful. So any operations we do within the system, we always put a message up at the top of the screen. We are putting messages at the bottom as well too, but generally at the top, and that message will be in green if it's a success. If for some reason the message or the operation that you were trying to do did not work, okay, let me just take a number off the phone number here, right, 1 digit, and I hit save, what will happen is you'll get a message up in top in red. Okay, so whenever you're working in the system, if you see a message in red, it generally means that that operation failed or didn't go through. Just check to see. The message usually will tell you what the problem is. In this case, it tells me that the representative phone number is invalid, right? So I need to come back here, correct the phone number. I will hit save, and then what will happen here is then in green, it tells me that the operation saved successfully. So again, as you go through this, you know, that's what you'll do. A couple other things that I'll talk about while I'm in this screen is that each organization or entity will be assigned just one user ID and password in order to manage the system, especially for this year. The system is new. We don't know going into next year if we're going to allow multiple usernames to manage the system, but as of right now, we're just assigning one username and password to come in for each entity to manage the system. What that means is that if you're, say, let's say the municipal clerk in a town, but you assign this task of, you know, tracking the financial disclosures to somebody else in your office, you will just have to give that person the username and the password to utilize to access the system. So again, just, you know, keep that in mind as we go through that. You know, initially for this year, it's just going to be one username and password that will have to be shared, you know, within your organization if more than one person is actually managing this particular process. A couple of other things that you'll see are buttons that you'll see throughout the system. You'll see a home button here. That always takes you back out to the home screen, right? So if I click on home, it takes us back out to the home screen. You'll see in the upper right-hand corner, you'll see the user that you're logged in as. You know, I'm logged in right now as Cheryl for Edison Township, County of Middlesex. And then to log out of the system, there's a couple different ways you can log out of the system. You can click on the log out button that's right here. That'll log you out. Since this is a browser-based system, you can actually click on the red X in the upper right-hand corner and close the browser. Or another way that you can be logged out of the system is that if you're logged into the system and you haven't done any work within the system in a period of time, from a security standpoint, the system's going to log you out automatically. At that point in time, you'll just have to log back in. So those are the different ways that you can log in and log out of the system. We're also going to be displaying up here as well too some stats or statistics real quick on your town or your entity. Basically, it'll tell you what submission year you're in, which right now we're in 2014. The DCA will be controlling that parameter. So next year when we roll into 2015, at some point in time, this will show 2015 and we'll go into the new year. The LGO rosters basically tell you how many people or how many positions you have set up on your roster. That number, we're working on that. That could be a little misleading because you can have a person within your organization that has multiple positions. So it's really the amount of positions that have been created within your rosters. And then how many FDS submissions have been done, right? So out of everybody on your roster, how many submissions have been you know, submitted so far? So in this case, we're showing 3. So before we jump into the Manage LGO roster, let me kind of explain how the system is going to work a little bit different this year from what you've been accustomed to in the past. From what I've been told is in the past, with the old system, what would happen is your roster generally got made up after or at the end of the process. When the LGOs had registered, I believe they came into your office and gave you some type of receipt that was produced out of the old system. And then basically from that receipt or something else, what you ended up doing is what you created a roster that you ended up submitting. Here, with this system now, the roster is what gets set up and created initially. If the roster is not set up and created initially, your LGOs will not be able to register. Okay, so it's important that we get the roster set up and completed in a timely manner. So once that's set up, the information that you're going to be setting up will then be distributed to your LGOs, and then they'll be able to go into the system and they'll be able to actually manage their accounts and file their FDSs. So that being said, I'm just going to pause real quick. I just want to kind of go through here real quick, just clear out some of these yeses that I got earlier on for my asking if you can hear me, and then I'll see if there's any questions that I can answer at this point.
Mark, while you're doing that, I just want to add, I saw a couple people that signed on after I gave the first code word.
Okay.
Just going to repeat the first code word for those people. It's Phoenix, P-H-O-E-N-I-X, Phoenix.
Okay. Thank you, Chris. Okay. So two quick questions. One is, Michelle, yeah, I understand the Edison and the ethics board. The only reason why I'm using Edison is because I'm a resident of Edison, so just picking on them, so don't worry about that. However your setup is within Edison, if you manage this, that's fine. We'll just, that might be something that Chris might want to note down if Michelle's the person on the ethics board secretary and she manages this. You're the one who ends up getting the credentials. So, yeah, don't, this is a test system, so it's all test data. It's not exactly how it's going to be in the live system. So, training page, all I'm seeing is statement system, training page, no home page. Lisa, I'm not really sure what not you're seeing there. So if you could just kind of respond again and give me a little bit more detail, that'd be great. Okay, so let's continue here. Okay, I'll come back to those questions in a little bit. Okay, so from the Manage LGO roster, what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on that link. And again, I've already started a roster here for this organization, for Edison Township. And what you'll see here is basically you'll see the people that I've already set up. Now, if you look at the line 2 and 3 here, you'll see that I'm set up actually twice. That's because within Edison, I actually had 2 positions that were required to file FDS, right? I was on the planning board as a member, and I was also, again, here as listed as the CFO. So again, as we go through the training today, I'm going to show you how you're going to be able to add multiple positions, especially if you have a person who has multiple positions within the organization or the entity, how we add them within the system. I will tell you that on our search grid, and we call this here our search grid, where you see last name, first name, board agency, title, login name, and so on and so forth. But this was a question that came up earlier, and I'm only showing 4 lines right now. But when you're, let's say, you're managing 40 or 50 positions, or if you're a large city that has several hundred positions, it might not, it might not be easy to go through this. So what we allow is if you click on any of our column headings, like I'll click on first name, the first click will put that column in ascending order, and if I click on it a second time, it puts it in descending order, right? And I can do that with any of the column headings, right? So it's just a quick way for you to put stuff in subtype of order, whether it's by board agency name, it's by title, login name, FDS filed, last name, first name, just by clicking on those column headings. The first click generally will put it in ascending order, and the second click will put it in descending order. We also give you the ability up top to do a name search as well too, right? So you can search by last name. So if I type in SM, right, starting with Smith and hit search, well, I only get one person that comes up with the last name that starts with SM. Okay, but if I type just S, for example, and hit search, well, I get 3 that come up, right? Because all these individuals' last names started with S. And the same thing with the first name, right? So if I came up here and I put an M in for Mark, right? Everybody that starts with an M. So we got Mark, and we got Michael. Okay, so again, that's how you can actually do your search within the system, especially when you have a very large roster and you quickly want to get to that person. You could just put their name in and hit search, and it'll take you to that particular person. So let's go, how do we add a new LGO? So this is where you're actually going to start your roster or continue to update and manage your roster. We do know that the first year in the system will probably be the most work that you have to do with the system, because you're going to basically have to create your roster from scratch. Questions came up, I believe, during the Municipal Clerks Conference a couple of weeks ago. One of the questions was, well, are you going to import the data from the old system from last year? And to be honest with you, after evaluating the data between, I think, the DCA and us, we just, the quality of the data just wasn't there that it made sense to import that over. So what we're going to do is we're going to have you basically start with your rosters from scratch and create them this year. But the good thing is that this year will be really the most work that you have to do on it, because as we go into subsequent years, these rosters will just be copied over from year to year. And at year 2 or next year, let's say 2015, all you'll have to do is just add any new people to the roster that now are required to file an FDS, and anybody who no longer is required, maybe you have a councilman that no longer is on council or so on and so forth, those people basically get disabled or removed from your roster at that point in time. Okay, so like I said, the first year is probably going to be the most work for the roster, but then subsequent years, it's really just maintenance work that you have to do to add the new people and get rid of the old people off the roster. So that being said, to add somebody to my roster, what I'm going to do is click on the button here that says Add LGO. Okay, what that's going to do is that's going to open up a screen for me to enter my information in. Now, the top part is really the key part for the LGO's standpoint, because this information that you put in up here, which is basically the first name and the last name, and then there's going to be a PIN number that the system is automatically going to generate for you. It's a unique PIN number that's going to be generated. These 3 pieces of information is what you're going to communicate to the LGO, and that information is what the LGO is going to need in order to register within the system. Okay? I will tell you that when it comes to first name, because this question came up, is especially people who have nicknames. Let's say Michael, he normally goes by Mike. Robert goes by Rob. Joseph goes by Joe. If you put in Joseph here and they try to register as Joe, okay, or you put Michael here and they try to register as Mike, the system's not going to recognize them. It's going to tell them that's invalid. My feeling is that you put in their legal name here, okay? So even though they go by Mike or Joe or Rob, I would put in Michael, Robert, Joseph, put in their full legal first name here, right? So let me go here. Let me add that in. I'm going to add in, let's do this, okay? So we'll add in Samuel Adams, right? That's going to be my person. And then what I'm going to do is once I enter that in, I could put a middle name in. It's not a required field. Anything with a red asterisk here is a required field, but that's not a required field. You can either put in their full name or you can put in their initial, okay? If you have several people that are the same name but, are different maybe by middle initial, that's how you might want to distinguish who's who, okay? So again, you can actually, do that by putting in their middle name and so on and so forth. But once I enter in their first name and last name, I'm going to click on the button that says Add New LGO. And as soon as I do that, what the system's going to do, oh, no, my fault. Sorry, I should have hit Save. Wrong button. Yeah, that was to add a new person. Well, save, sorry, Save. So once I click on Save, what will happen is a PIN number automatically gets generated for Sam Adams, okay? So here's this PIN number, 71358. Now let me talk a little bit about the PIN number. This PIN number, no matter how many positions within Edison Township Sam Adams has, okay, this PIN number will stay the same within Edison Township. But in a minute, what we're going to do is we're going to go in and we're going to add Samuel Adams to another township because Samuel Adams has a part-time job in another township, okay? He or she will be given a different PIN number from that organization. So no matter how many different organizations the LGO is associated with, okay, they will get a unique PIN number from each individual organization. And what they'll do is they'll take those PIN numbers and they'll actually assign those PIN numbers to their main account that they're going to create. And I'm going to show you how an LGO creates an account in a little bit later. But the PIN number is what these 3 fields are what you're going to have to give to the LGO. First name, last name, and PIN number. Those are the critical fields. Now from your side, what you'll do is you'll move down into the next section and you will add the different positions within the town that Sam Adams is associated with, right? So the first thing we need to do is we need to pick the category that this falls into. So it's either an elected official, it's your independent authorities, it's your managerial executive member or confidential employee, or other, okay, depending on how they fall in, right? So let's say within Edison, right, Sam Adams happens to be, elected official. He's a councilman, right? So I'll put in councilman, right? The board of the agency, it's how you kind of, list them within your organization. I'll just put governing body, right? Okay. And then the last thing you have here is an effective term, a from and to date. Again, it's not a required field. If you have the information and you want to enter the information, you can put that information in. But it's just provided there. Right now, we're going back and forth because it is required on the FDS, but it's really the LGO's responsibility to do that. But like I said, if you have it and you want to use it, you can actually utilize those fields to list what their particular term is. If you don't have it, don't worry about it. It isn't a required field. Really, once I've entered these 3 fields in, I'm going to click on Save. And then once I click on Save, what will happen is up at the top it says Position is saved successfully. And then down below, you'll see list of positions held. Okay, right? So Sam Adams is here listed as the councilman for Edison. Now, still working within Sam Adams' account here, I can go on and I can add an additional position within Edison Township, right? So let me just do this, right? So I'll put in Planning Board. I'll say he's a member, right? I'm not going to put any effective to or from date in here. I'm going to click on Save. And then down below, we'll see that Sam Adams has been added to the Planning Board as well, too. Okay? So again, you can add all the different positions for Sam Adams within this account. For anything that Samuel Adams does outside of Edison Township with the county, other municipalities, whatever, that is not your responsibility. You're responsible just for the positions for this person within your organization and within your entity. Okay, so again, that's how we would add that in. Now, at this point in time, at the bottom, a request had come is, well, can I print this page and give this information, to Sam Adams, like print it out? We do have a print button at the bottom of the screen, so if you click on print, what it will do is it'll open up your printer dialog box, and you can just send it to whatever printer you want, and then just hand it to him. So, really, it doesn't matter how you communicate this information to him or her. You could do it via printing out the form and handing it to them. You can send them the information via email. It's totally up to you on how you want to communicate this information to the person, okay? But again, the 3 pieces of information they need is first name, last name, and the PIN number of how they're registered. Really, that's all they need at that point in time. To continue on, now if I have other employees or other LGOs that I need to enter in for my town, that's where I clicked on it accidentally earlier on. That's where we click on Add New LGO. Once I click on that, what it does is it's going to clear out this screen, and now I can come in here and now I can add my next LGO's information to the system. Okay, quick and easy. Just go right down the list and just start creating my roster. If I go back out to my roster, now you'll notice in my roster, Samuel Adams is listed there twice, right? He's listed for governing body as the councilman, and then he's also listed on the planning board and a member, okay? Now, one of the fields, what you'll see, or 2 of the fields here, you will see the PIN number that was associated with it. And again, the PIN number will stay the same for all positions within your entity, okay? So this PIN number, 71358, is the same number for all positions for Samuel Adams within your organization. You will also have an indication of when that LGO files their FDS. This flag, as soon as their FDS is filed and submitted, this flag will go from a no to a yes. Okay, so you can, again, it's not your responsibility to make sure that they file. It's their responsibility. But if you're curious of who filed and who hasn't filed yet, this indicator flag here will tell you as well too. If you ever need to edit anything, there's an edit button here, so you can actually go in. And you can either add additional positions for that person. Let's say you made a mistake and you put in the wrong information here, you can actually delete it. You can delete the whole LGO altogether, with the exception that if that LGO has filed an FDS, unfortunately you won't be able to delete it. Okay, it's everything up until that LGO has filed that you'll be able to delete it. So just keep that in mind as you go through this. If you have additional LGOs, again, you can just click on the Add button. A question that came up this morning was, what if a LGO is assigned a new position halfway through the year? That's fine. Just come in at any point in time once that LGO has that new position. Just add it to their account, and now you have it within the system. So that's not a problem. At any point in time throughout the year, you can come in and you can actually add any new positions, to the system. So that's how you create your roster, that's how you add your roster, and so on and so forth. So I'm going to go back out to our home screen. We do have reports. We're currently building the reports here. I'm not sure yet if this is currently working because I know they were just working on it as of yesterday, but I'll give it a try real quick. Oh yeah, okay, so here's basically a roster here, but again, I don't know if it's exactly finalized and set up yet, but any reports that come out will be listed here as we create reports, so you can just click on them and run those reports. All our reports always go to the screen first, to a print screen, so it never hurts to run any of the reports that are in the system, so you can take a look at them and just see if they're going to be applicable to what you need. Okay, so I'm going to pause there for a second. I'm going to jump to the questions, because we have some here, and I'll try to answer them. Okay. Do you enter under board/agency the name of the entity or a title like board member? Okay. No, you do not enter the name of the entity. Well, actually, let me go back there for a second. Let's go back to the roster. And maybe, Chris, if you're on, you can jump in just for one question I had when we talked about earlier with some of the towns with the fire districts or the different authorities. I would say that if you were picking an independent authority, let's say it's the Edison Township Sewer Authority, then you could put that in the board agency. You know, you can put Edison Township Sewer Authority. Am I correct, Chris? Or?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah.
Use your own. You can stick with your own way that you locally identify these boards and agencies, and on some level the position held. Governing body equals borough council equals township committee equals township council, et cetera, et cetera. So whatever you use unique to you, that's fine.
Okay, good. Thank you. Let's see, next question. Okay, somebody came up with a question. I know I didn't touch on it, but it's a good point to point out. Somebody came up, what is the disabled box used for? Okay, so you'll see right here where my cursor is, there's a disabled box. That's basically going to be used for subsequent years if a person, an LGO, is no longer on your active roster. At that point in time, we can actually disable them, right? So they don't, it's basically an active, inactive, we call it disabled. So they won't be on your active roster, let's say for 2015, if they're no longer have a position within your organization that requires them to file an FDS. So that's kind of what that's used for. Let's see here. Can we print the roster? Yes. From that report section, you're going to be able to print out your roster. Like I said, once we get that report working, we're still working on a couple things in the system. Yes, you'll be able to print out your full roster. And we're also going to hope to give you the ability to print out a roster in like an Excel type format. So if you want to do some type of mail merge with Word or something, you'll be able to do that as well too. Okay, next question. If an existing LGO has filed is appointed to another position which also requires a filing, does he or she have to refile, or is the previous filing applicable? If they're within the same organization or entity, okay, the first FDS that they file, all the positions that have been created, so I created 2 positions for myself there. When I go to file that FDS, I only have to file it one time, okay? All my positions are going to be as part of that FDS. Now, when we get to the LGO setup, I will go over a couple different things on different scenarios of how an LGO can file all their FDSs in one shot for all the entities they're associated with, or they might have to file a couple times depending on how quickly they get the PIN numbers from the different entities they're at. So when we get to the LGO section, I'll cover a couple of those questions there so you kind of understand that flow. Let's go. Next question. How do I determine who is an LGO and therefore whom I need to inform and ensure they comply? Is there a set of criteria? Chris?
I'll answer that one, Mark.
Yep.
The answer to that is, number one, if you want to start working on this now before we issue the local finance notice, look at last year's local finance notice as a starting point. There's the notice that has traditionally gone out from year to year has some explanation as to how you go about figuring all of this out. Start with the low-hanging fruit, your elected officials, because you know who they are quite easily, then move on to the planning board and the zoning board, et cetera. The most difficulty we've seen people have is trying to figure out who a managerial executive and or confidential employee is, and it's not easy. All we can tell you is if you look at the standard and look at our FAQ, and we have some Attorney General opinions on the website. You're going to have to work on that with your Labor Council, and if you're not getting any assistance for whatever reason from your Labor Council, at least document for your own purposes that you made the attempt, and make your own. At that point, you're going to have to make your own educated determination as to who should be on your roster or not. But I strongly recommend against just sweeping everybody into. Over the years, that many towns simply don't do any analysis, and if you work for that town, you're a local government officer. That is not the case. That's not the intent of the statute. It's unfair to the people who aren't local government officers to be put on the roster, and it just creates a lot more work for you. It creates more work for the division. But we can't give you anything more solid, because Town A might have a local government officer and call it something, and then in Town B they might have a similar position and they have a different name for it, or vice versa. So there's not a one-shoe-fits-all approach, unfortunately.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Okay, next question. Is this webinar just for town administrators, or is it also for the board members who will be completing financial disclosure statements? Right now, it's basically for the users within the organizations who manage the rosters and creating the rosters of people who need to file. We will be, over the next couple of weeks, we will be adding a documentation and a training video for the LGOs to show them what they need to do in order to set up their account and file their financial disclosure online. So basically right now, these training sessions are really more not for showing people how to file, but mainly just showing you what the process is. I mean, I'm going to show you what an LGO goes through just in case you field any questions on your end, whether it's from your councilman or your own, co-workers within your organization. So again, but it's not really, that's not the intent of this training, is to show the people how to file their FDS. Next question says, I'm employed at a community college. What positions require completion of this disclosure statement? And I think Chris kind of just answered that. I mean, you'll have to go back to the directives that have been issued on what positions and so on and so forth require FDSs to, to submit and so on and so forth. So if that's not the question you're asking, Maria, just, just phrase it a different way for me.
And I just want to add that the standard for who has to file has not changed as a result of this process. So if you start with prior years' rosters and you want to work forward and try to clean them up, it's the same standards. Nothing's changed.
Yeah, and actually I had basically a kind of a response from Kelly here. She says a list of LGOs that need to file for the DCA desk reference on the MCNJ website. So under, I guess, DCA desk reference on the MCNJ website. So I guess there's a list there of LGOs that need to file. So if anybody's curious, they can go out to that site and see a list of who needs to file. So thank you, Kelly. Okay, so let's continue. Those are the questions that I have so far. So let's continue on here. So what I'm going to do real quick is I'm going to log out of here. I'm going to log out of Edison Township. I'm going to log in real quick under another township. And I'm going to say, because I said earlier that Sam Adams was, he had a position in another town. So I logged in under South Brunswick Township. I'm going to go in to manage their roster. And basically, I'm going to add Sam Adams here as a member of their roster. And we'll do this. I'll click on Save. And now you'll notice now a new PIN number for Sam Adams has been issued here. Now, this PIN number is different than the PIN number that was generated from Edison Township. Okay? So again, Edison Township will give Sam Adams their PIN number, and then South Brunswick will give Sam Adams the PIN number that was associated for South Brunswick. But what Sam Adams will end up doing is taking both of those PIN numbers when he or she creates their account, and they'll associate both organizations to their account in one shot. Okay? And if they wait a little bit and they get all their PIN numbers from all the different entities that they're associated with, they basically will only have to file their FDS one time and one time only. So, but let me go here and let me add him to the to the list, so I'll say he's administration, and we'll say he's the CFO there. I'm going to click on Save. And that position has now been added down here for Sam Adams, so he's the CFO in South Brunswick. Again, I can print out that position and I can hand it to him, but if I go back out, now I see on my South Brunswick roster, I see Sam Adams as being listed there under South Brunswick as the CFO, okay? So again, that's all I wanted to do. I just wanted to add him under another organization. So let me log out, and now I'm going to kind of show you or go through what the LGO or how the LGO gets set up and registers within the system. The LGOs will need a couple of things. The LGOs will need an email address, okay? Now for the clerks, okay, I'll address this mainly to you. Since you have to file an FDS as well too as an LGO, you will not be able to use the email address that you're using to manage your rosters, okay? You have to have a unique email address as you go forward, as you register basically as an LGO, okay? So just keep that in mind, that email addresses cannot be used multiple times for different types of roles within the system. So if you're filing an FDS on behalf of yourself as an LGO, you will have to use another email address than the one that was assigned to you or given to you to actually manage the rosters within your organization. So what you would do here to actually do your new registration as an LGO, right on the login page, we have a link here that says New Registration, Local Government Officer. So we'll click on that. What it's going to do now, it's going to ask you to come in here. It's going to ask you to put your 3 pieces of information in, your first name, your last name, and your PIN number. Now, since I have 2 PIN numbers that were given to me, one from Edison and one from South Brunswick, it doesn't matter which one I use first, okay? I can use either one, because once I register the first one, then the system's going to give me the ability to register the other one as well too under my account. But I first need to establish my account, right, with at least 1 PIN number. So let me come in here. Let me put in my information, right? And actually, I'm going to leave off the S for 1 second here in my last name. I'm just going to put Adam, but I'm going to put in my first PIN number, and I'm going to say validate PIN, right? And what the system's going to say is the system's going to give me a message that says first name, last name, and PIN number did not match. Please verify and try again, right? So they're not going to be able to register or validate their information unless that first name, last name, and PIN number are exactly the same as how it was registered on the roster. So here I'm going to put in Adams. I'm going to click on Validate PIN, right? Now the system tells me the given PIN is validated successfully. Now please continue with your registration. Now I can go in here, and now I can come in and I can enter in the rest of my information and register here online, right? Okay. Now, we're going to ask them for their email address, right? So let's see here. What am I going to use here? Okay. I'll put in my email address. It's going to ask to confirm it. Okay. And then it's going to ask me for a password. I'm going to come in and I'm going to put my password. Okay. And then down at the bottom, once I put in that password, there's going to be some terms and conditions here that we're going to ask them to read. Okay. And basically what they need to do is click on the checkbox here to say that I've read the terms or the definitions and instructions and that they agree. And now what they can do is they can click on the register link. Okay. And then what it will do is it'll tell them that their registration has been completed successfully, right? And it will give them their information. At this point in time, they can print out this information. They can click on print, and they can print out that information, if they need to. So again, that's available right there. Let me just write this down. Okay. So now at this point in time, I'm going to log in. Okay. I've registered. Now I need to log into the system. I'm going to log in. Okay, now, when I come in here and I log in as that FDS, okay, as that LGO, I'm sorry, what I'm going to see is submission year is 2014, FDS submission says submission pending. Now, if I go into, well, the edit profile is what you had similar to you earlier, where you can go in and update they can go in and update their password and all that good stuff. But manage positions, if I click on that link, now you'll see the positions that I've associated with my account. Now, the two positions that are here are the first two positions with Edison. That was the first PIN number that I used to set up my account and validate it. But now, since I have another position from South Brunswick, what I'm going to do is I'm going to validate that position as well too, right? And what I can do here is I can put in my PIN number from South Brunswick. Okay, I'll click on Validate PIN. Let's see. Oh, I spelled the name wrong, right? It's UEL. Okay, validate. Now what's happened is that PIN has been validated successfully. Now the South Brunswick position has been added to my account. So now all three positions have been added. Now, to make it easier for the LGOs, now once I file my FDS, I only have to do that FDS one time, and that FDS will be associated with all three of these positions. But let's say, for example, I had originally filed, came in here, and I just put the Edison PIN in, and I did my FDS, okay, and I submitted that. And then 3 or 4 weeks from now, I get the PIN from South Brunswick, and I add it to my account. At that point in time, I would have to refile that FDS for South Brunswick. But what happens is we now retain the information, the previous information that was entered in the FDS. So now that LGO basically just has to review and update anything that might have changed, and then just resubmit that FDS now for the South Brunswick position, okay, because it was added. But if they wait, if the LGO waits and gets all their PIN numbers and gets them all into the system at the same time, then they basically just have to file that FDS one time, and it will apply to all their positions. So let me do that. Let me come out of here. Now, from the home screen, the LGO will then go over to File Financial Disclosure Statement, so they'll click on that.
Hey, Mark.
Okay. Yes.
I just want to stop you there. I want to give everybody the second code word.
Oh.
The second code word is Beagle, like the dog. B-E-A-G-L-E. Beagle. B-E-A-G-L-E. Thanks, Mark.
Okay, no problem, Chris. Okay, so once I click on submit, or let's go back, sorry. So I click on File Financial Disclosure Statement. What it will do, it's going to pull some of my information over from my login screen, right? So you'll see that there. I can put in some of the other things. Again, it's really the fields that have the red asterisks are the required fields. Now you'll see at the bottom, you'll see the positions held. So this FDS is going to apply to these three positions here, right? Because again, the two from Edison, the one from South Brunswick. But now I'm going to come in here. I'm going to add in information. Right? I'm going to put my spouse's information in there. We're going to come down. Now at this point in time, okay, if I can click on Save, right, and now I've actually kind of started my FDS, or my financial disclosure form. Now one question that came up in the past, I think, or last year, was that if they got to a point in this financial disclosure statement asking them for information and they didn't have that information at that point in time, they kind of got stuck, or they would lose everything that they did up to that point. Here, we're actually storing the information, so they can always come back at any point in time and continue this form. So if I happen to say, you know what, let's go on to the next screen, right, and it's asking me to, you know, disclose all sources of income, right, and maybe I say, you know what, I don't have everything right now. I'll come in and log in, you know, another time later on today, tomorrow, whatever. Everything that I've done up to that point has been saved as long as I hit save or the next button, right? So they don't lose anything they've done. They can keep coming back here, right? So let me continue here. So let's say here, let me put in here, I'll put in South Brunswick. I don't know what the address is offhand, right? This is for myself. I will hit save. I will say source of income, right, we'll put that in. That's going to be my dependent. I'll hit, oh, not dependent, my spouse. I'll hit save. And what I'm doing here is on this screen, okay, I'm adding multiple sources of income right here. I don't have to, after I hit save, it keeps adding those entries down below, okay? So again, I can keep going and entering all my different sources of income, right? So now if I go Edison Township, right, this is for myself. and I click on Save. So you can see I can keep adding multiple sources of income right there without going on to the next screen. Once I'm done, then I click on Next. I go on to the next screen. Here's where we have, different fees and honorariums and so on and so forth. So now, at this point in time, if I try to click on Next, the system's not going to allow me to go to the next screen, okay? Basically, it's saying that I either have to add an entry in or I need to click on the None box here, right? So if there's no honorariums or other fees or whatever, I can just click on None, okay? I can then go on to Next. Okay, here it's going to ask me to list each source of gifts, reimbursements, or prepaid expenses valuing, in excess of $400. Again, if I try to click on Next, it won't allow me to go further. I'll either have to click on None, or I'll have to, put in, some information, listed here and so on and so forth, right? So here I'm going to click on None. I don't have anything over $400. Same thing here. Enter the name of business organizations with interest held and so on and so forth. Again, I don't have any. I'll click on None. Now, here we come to property, right? What property that person might own. So I know this was a problem I heard from last year's form is, let's say I'm selecting, property me and my wife own together, right? So I'm going to say, Edison Township. I'm going to say, block 150, lot 10. Now, me and my wife own the property jointly, right? 50% each. So I'm going to put in 50% ownership for myself. I'm going to hit on Save. And then what I'm going to do here is I'll pick Edison again, right? And I'll say block 150, lot 10. I'll say 50% ownership, and I'll say that's my spouse, and I'll hit Save. Right? So they can enter all their properties in. If I own property in another town, I can list that as well too. Okay? You'll also notice that once I list properties or anything, not just properties, but anything, any entries, my None button is now disabled. I can't click on that None. These would have to be deleted for this None to work. Okay? Also, too, as they're going through this process, okay, they can always preview their form at any point in time by clicking on any of the buttons that say Preview FDS Form. So if I click on that button, what will happen is the system will open up a copy of the form for me. Excuse me one second here. Give it a second to generate, right? So there's a copy of my form, right? It lists all the information that I've entered in so far. Okay, so again, at any point in time, they can take a look at what their form looks like. As I mentioned, if I go to the next screen here, these are comments, right? I'll say this is a test FDS form. Okay, I'll click on Save, and then my next button basically is the last screen. It's basically, this is the certification screen where they're going to actually certify that the information that they're submitting is valid. Now, at this point in time, let's say I don't want to submit it. Let's say I'm not really sure, all the information I put in, I have all the information, I want to think about it. Well, that's fine. If I click on the Home button and I go out, right, it's still going to tell me that my submission is pending. I can log out. I can come back in tomorrow, go back to my financial disclosure statement, right? So, and I could just next all the way through here, right, because everything's been filled in, right? I could just double check everything again, right? Everything's been saved that I've entered so far. And back to the last screen here. Now, you know what? I've checked everything. I'm confident I've gotten, everything in there. Forget about the property on Long Beach Island. I'm giving that to my kids, But before they can actually submit this, right, you have a Submit button that's grayed out down here. If you can see where my cursor is, right? Won't allow me to submit this financial disclosure for two reasons. Number one, we're going to force the LGO to review their form, their actual form, one more time, okay? So they have to click on the Review the button, right? So they're going to have to actually take a look at their form and review it. And then once they do that, then they need to electronically sign this FDS, right? So they'll type in their name. This will be their electronic signature. And then at this point in time, when they click on Submit Financial Disclosure, okay, it's going to tell them that as soon as they submit this FDS, no other changes can be made to it, okay? So this is basically final. So again, we're warning them. We're telling them they can't amend it, they can't supplement, modify, change whatsoever, okay? Let's hit OK. I'm fine with it. I'm going to hit OK. Now it's going to tell them that their financial disclosure statement has been submitted successfully. It gives them a confirmation ID, a date and time that it was actually submitted, okay? I know in the past, last year, they would get a receipt at the end. They would have to come and give you that receipt, okay, to prove to you that that FDS has been filed. That no longer has to be done, okay? So they don't have to print this out. They can if they want. There's a print button here, but they do not have to give you that information. And the reason for that is, let me log out, okay? I'm going to log back into Edison Township, because as soon as they file that FDS, let's go to our roster. We'll notice here for Sam Adams, FDS filed now says yes. Okay, so as soon as that FDS gets filed, submitted and filed, your system or your organization is updated, your roster is updated to show that they filed that FDS. Same thing, if I log into South Brunswick, because there was a position that was on that FDS for South Brunswick, if I look at the South Brunswick roster, we'll see Sam Adams, FDS has been filed, okay? And then the last thing is, once that's filed, I'm going to jump over to the public search site, okay? Now, on the public search site, okay, the public or whoever's searching will be able to search either by local government entity, so the municipality, authority, what have you, or they actually can search by name, right? So let me put in Adams, spell it right, and I hit search. Now the system's going to come back and it's going to list all the Adams that have been filed. And right there I see, oh, Sam Adams came up 3 times. I see 2 FDSs were filed for Edison Township and 1 for South Brunswick. So as soon as that FDS is filed, besides updating your roster that it's been filed, it is now immediately available for viewing on the public website. Okay, and then the public can come in here. They can click on the view button. They can open up that FDS, and they can actually see the information that was submitted online. Okay, if they want to search by an organization, right? So if I come back here, let's say I wanted to search for everything for Edison Township, I can do that, and I can search all the FDSs for, let's say, Edison Township. And let's say I want to get a copy of all these. Well, then I can just click on the check boxes here. Where we have this CAPTCHA here where they'll have to enter in a phrase in order to download all those items. But if they enter that incorrectly and hit download, then what will happen is that person will be able to actually download all those FDSs, right? So now you'll see on my screen here, I actually have 3 that were downloaded. Each is 2 pages. 1 for Mark, 1 for Robert Smith, and then the 1 for Sam Adams were all downloaded. Okay? So again, this is the public site that the public will go to and be able to view that instantaneously. And that's the reason why, too, the LGO doesn't have to give you the receipt, because again, we're updating a couple different places, your roster and the public site and all that. So again, that's that's everything that we've done there. So let me head back to the questions here, because I bet we have a bunch, which we do. So let's kind of go through these here. Okay, first question. A list is in the miscellaneous duties chapter, the last chapter, the desk reference, for municipal clerks. Okay, so Kelly was saying that that's where you can find the LGO list of who has to register. Thank you, Kelly. It says, I only have 1 email address. Okay. Again, for you as an LGE, we're going to use your email address, to send your credentials to manage your roster. But again, if you have to file an FDS as an LGO, you're going to have to use a different email address than the email address that you use, for that. Again, personal email address. You can go out and, get a new email address from, Gmail, Outlook, Yahoo, whatever. But you'll have to use a different email address for that.
I just want to add that the initial contact from us to the local government entity reps, in particular the municipal clerks and the municipal clerks, is going to be based on the email address we have for you in the GovConnect system. So we'll send the initial username and password for you to be able to sign in that very first time, and then you can go in there and you can change that information once you're in there. So it's important that your GovConnect email address was current as of, like a week ago, because that's when we pulled it and started developing the email list to start milling this stuff out next week.
Okay. Next question. What if the password they currently use on their own email does not meet the criteria established in i.e. 8 characters. Again, the password that they use in our system has nothing to do with the email password they use on their email password system. Totally two different systems. So they'll have to create a password on this system that meets the criteria. So again, they might have to add a character or two after their digits or whatever. But again, two different systems. So they'll have to meet the criteria that we've established on this system. Who's going to explain this process to the LGOs who have multiple positions with multiple entities? Again, we're hoping that some of the information that we're going to be able to provide on the website will explain that. We are hoping that, unfortunately, as you're given your PIN number to those people, you might just explain to them that they should, if they have any other entities that they're required to file with, that they're going to have to get a PIN number from those entities. Again, it's going to be the responsibility of that entity to establish and distribute that PIN number to the person. So I know it's probably not the best process right now, but hopefully the LGOs know that if they are part of multiple entities, that again, they're going to need multiple PIN numbers. Since the municipal clerks keep a copy of the FDS for his or her town, will we have to print out at each FDS? I don't believe so. Since the FDSs are going to be on the public site, unless you need them for any specific reason, and Chris, I don't know if there's a requirement that the municipal clerks have to have a copy, but as far as I know, since they are going to be out on the public site and they're available to everybody, I don't think there's a need that you have to physically print them out and create more paper for you to track and keep, keep track of within your organization. So let's go to the next question. What was the link for those who have to file again? What was the link for those who have to file again? I'm not sure I understand the question exactly. Let me kind of come back to that in a second, and let me see if I can understand. If not, if you could just rephrase the question, Fern, and I can maybe answer it a little bit better. I'll move on to the next question. I would not use my personal email address since it becomes a public record. Again, Chris, you might want to touch base on that. I know that came up this morning, so.
We've always suggested that people use business email addresses for whatever reason they need it for their public employment or public service, but it is up to you. We're not collecting the email address for purposes of having an email address. It's actually the username. So if we got an OPRA request for a list of emails, we don't really maintain a list of the emails. And I'm not quite sure, because it hasn't happened yet, whether if we get a request for everybody's usernames, whether that's even operable. I tend to think that usernames are probably not operable. But I would err on the side of caution, because if you follow OPRA stuff, you've probably already come to the conclusion that the court systems are very liberal in interpreting it, and it's very likely that somebody that comes along and wants something that's being maintained, either under the common law or the statute, they're going to get it. But what email address the LGOs use for creating their username is entirely up to them. But I would encourage them to use a business email for that purpose.
Yeah, and if anybody has a problem using a normal personal email address, I'll just give you my personal experience. I have an email address that I've set up with Gmail that I use for things I don't normally give out my normal email address for. It could be advertisements, it could be, just something like, you go sometimes to a show or whatever and they ask you for your email address, and, I'd like to see what they send me, but I don't really want to go into my normal email. You can always create, just a email address just to submit or manage your LGO information. You know what I mean? Just, that's used for that only. So it's up to you. But again, as Chris, alluded to, we're not, that's one of the reasons why we're not forcing really a data entry field per se for you to update or put email addresses in. As he said, it is a username. So to me, I don't think it would be something that you can, get via Oprah, since it's more of a security issue. That's like asking somebody for their password. It's your username and password to access the system. I know it's their email address, but that's what we utilize as their username. So again, those are just things you should just be aware of as you go, use the system. Next question from Donald. Will there be instructions that can be given to the LGO for filing? Yes, I mentioned that a little bit earlier. We're working on written instructions, and we're also going to have a video that there'll be a link, most likely on probably the main website that they can actually run and go through. Short tutorial, basically, on what steps they need to follow as they create their account and need to file and so on and so forth. Next question, it says, my municipal clerk does not handle FDS. I do. How can I make it so I get the information sent to me? As Chris had mentioned earlier, they're taking all the municipal clerk's information from, I guess, GovConnect, and it's going to be sent to the municipal clerks within the town. It would be up to your municipal clerk to share that username and password with you. Since we're only assigning one username and password for each town, just let the municipal clerk know that when that email comes or that information comes, just to forward it to you at that point in time. And is there a help screen? Again, there will be some help manual created that's currently being worked on. I just don't know exactly when it's going to be available. I will let you know that we are recording several of these webinars, and we're going to convert them to videos. So you or anybody else can actually go back and review these as soon as they're available, and we find a place where we're going to host them. We'll get that information will be sent out to you at that point in time. Okay, it says, is the roster for a sewage authority past of the Creating Townships roster, or does the authority set up its own roster? If the sewage authority is part of the township or falls under the township realm, then it's going to be up to the township to create and manage that roster. As of this time, and Chris, you can correct me if I'm wrong, the authorities are not managing their own rosters.
That's correct. The towns will include in their roster things like the authorities, the fire districts as part of their roster. The counties will include county authorities and boards and commissions as part of their roster. The outliers are the joint insurance funds and the county colleges, and there's a couple other joint meetings. Local boards. But yeah, to answer the question is, the information from the authority for that particular person that had that question, that information gets conveyed to the clerk, and the clerk is going to have that person on their roster.
Okay. Okay. Next question, Chris, and I'm going to refer this a little bit to you as well too, because I know this question came up yesterday in our training session with the staff at DCA. It said, undoubtedly, there will be someone that will wish to amend the FDS. Why not allow them to amend up until the last day of filing? Otherwise, I believe the municipal clerks will be burdened with the complaints rather than the state. So you might want to just address what we,
Well, we talked about that over the course of the last couple of months as being an option, and it could potentially be an option next year. One of the concerns that we had was that people would have multiple FDSs for the same filing year, and we had that problem last year when people were hitting the submit button 20 times, and then they had 20 FDSs showing up in the reports. We're stressing, and as you saw in the pop-up at the end of the filing process, we're stressing all over the place. Are you really, really, really sure you want to file now? The bottom line is, if you forget to put something important on your form, and you remember in July or August about that Long Beach Island house that you own, and you didn't have it on your form as of the deadline, there is a statutory deadline, you've missed something, and you have violated something. We're trying to hold everybody up to a higher standard. I mean, that's the bottom line. But maybe next year, being able to amend a submission up to the filing deadline might be something that we can incorporate into the system. But it's not present this year. Once they submit, it's submitted, and we can't take it down at that point.
I'm not sure they can wait for the very last day of file.
Okay.
Doing it.
Okay. Next question says, what was the link for who has the file again, I'm going to think that's the LGOs. I think it was at the municipal clerk's website. It was MCNJ website, so I believe that's the municipal clerk's website.
It's
So
also
again,
on the Division of Local Government Services website as well.
okay.
Under the financial notices section, there's a whole bunch of stuff there, including the Attorney General opinions on numerous titles. Last year's local finance notice you can get under the local finance notice section of the website.
Yeah, correct. Yep. Okay. Next question. It says, when can we begin creating our rosters? We don't have an exact go-live date yet, but it's going to be within the next 2 weeks. That being said, I know the next question that's going to come up is about the filing deadline, so I'll have Chris address that real quick.
Right now, the deadline has been extended through May 15th. That's subject to an additional extension depending on when it's actually rolled out to you guys, because you guys have to create the rosters and you're going to need time to do that. So we know we really can't hold local government officers to a deadline until we know when we turn the system on for you guys. So right now it's May 15th, but if that changes, you'll see a GovConnect notice from us with a new date.
Okay. Next question says, we are custodians, and if someone wants a hard copy, we must provide it. That question is from Elaine. Elaine, I don't believe now with the new system, the LGO is going to have to give you a copy of the FDS. I would direct them out to the person who's requesting that. I would just direct them to the public site and have them, view it and print it off on their own. Since you're not
maintaining anything at this point. You're not being obligated to maintain a paper copy, and you don't maintain the electronic versions of these because they reside somewhere else. So there's nothing for you as a custodian to supply somebody. You should just refer them to the website, and then if somebody wants a paper copy, they'll need to request that from us. And they'd have to have a really good reason why they can't, obtain the copy on their own. But you don't have any of this at this point moving forward. And I will caution you, if you determine that you want to start downloading these things off the public search tool, where you can do that now quite easily once they're all filed, and you want to maintain that on your hard drive, you might create a situation under the common law where if you do get an open request that you might have to supply that, because now you're maintaining a record where even if you didn't have to maintain it before, you're maintaining it. So that's something to just be cautious about.
Yeah. Okay. Chris, real quick, before I go on to the next question, because we got maybe 10 more questions. Somebody asked, can they get the last keyword?
Yes. The third code word is shrimp. S-H-R-I-M-P. Shrimp.
Okay. So, and we'll announce that one more time, because I know a couple people mentioned they might have to just run out for a few seconds and come back. Okay. A comment came from one of the users that says, with the email addresses, again, talk to your IT staff and see if they can create an additional email, whether it's for you as the LGE who needs to file as an LGO, get an additional email address or whatever. So again, that was a comment that came from one of the users. Again, another comment, the person who asked where to find who is a public office or agency, it is in Chapter 11 of the study guide of the municipal clerks section. So again, just additional information. It says, just confirming the email address for the person who is managing the FDS roster has to be different than the email address that the same person utilizes for entering their FDS info. That's correct. So if you have an email address, let's say mark@edisontownship.gov, and that's the email address that I use to manage my roster. If I have to file an FDS, I can't use that same email address. I have to use another email address. Either I'm going to use my personal email address, or I'm going to utilize or create a Gmail account or something just to file my FDS. Okay, so yes, they can't be the same. Have to be two different email addresses. What happens when you have only one business email? Again, we just addressed that. You'll need to somehow obtain a second email address to file your FDS. Can an email address be changed at the time the FDS is created and submitted? Again, we're not listing the email address on the FDS. The email address is only your username to log into the system. So just, be aware of that. I mean, it's not, I don't believe it's being put onto the FDS. So just keep that in mind. It says, when the public views, can they see our emails? Again, no, I don't believe so. Let me just go back to the public view here just to double check. But I don't think we're putting the email address on there. Right, there's no space here for the email address. So no, we're not, it's not on the form. So no, they're not going to be able to see that. Next question, what about a planning board member who cannot utilize their work email address? What do you suggest, and if they do not have a home email address? Again, they will have to somehow come up with an email address. Again, there's free sites out there, Gmail, Outlook.com, Yahoo. I mean, they can always just apply for a free email address in order to manage this process.
Let me just add to that, I mean, if you have a planning board member or a governing body member who, for whatever reason, doesn't have a personal computer, and that's their only issue, as a member of your governing body family, there should be no hesitation on your part to offer them the use of one of your municipal computers for purposes of logging on and getting this done. I mean, if that's the issue in that particular case, they don't have a computer at the house. They're a part of your organization. They're a volunteer member of a board or what have you. There's no reason why, if you have a resource like a computer at a desk somewhere available for a half hour or less, to let them use it.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Chris. Couple more questions, and it looks like we're pretty much done. It says, is this FDS for the new year 2014, or is it actually based on information for 2013? They're filing in 2014, but the information relates to year 2013. Correct, Chris?
That's correct. And in fact, it says that on the actual FDS itself, it's there in each section. It states that it's for the prior year's information.
Yeah. Okay. So that's that. And then the last question we're down to, it says, if the username is going to be the clerk's email, won't it be hard for her to assign or forward it to someone else? Again, I mean, all they could do is, again, if somebody else within the organization is managing this process, the roster, that clerk will just need to give that username and password to that person. I mean, the clerk can always change the password after the roster is created if they have a problem with that password, or temporarily change the password to something why the roster is being managed by somebody else. But like I said, for right now, there's only going to be one username and password per organization for this year. Again, it will be something that we potentially could look at, next year, and see if there could be multiple people who can manage that roster. Okay, we got a couple. I'd just like to try to clarify that, just because I think I might be interpreting the question differently. If a clerk has an email address, let's just say clerk1@town.com, and that's tied in with an email account at the town, and there's a password associated with that email address, that's completely different than the password that you're going to create when you go in and edit profile after you log on for the first time. It does not, and probably should not, be the same password that you're using. Because when you use that email address for our system, it's simply a username. That's all it is. So certainly if you don't want staff to have your password for your email account, don't give it to them. Because it should be a completely different password for this FDS system. Just remember, your email address for purposes of the FDS is a username, and it's not an email address. Okay. Thanks, Chris. Okay, so we have a couple more questions coming in here. One question, Carol did point out that the form does say year of service 2014 instead of 2013. We'll correct that. You're absolutely correct. It should say, right, Chris? Should this say 2014 or 2013? Year of service is current year, is the filing year. Oh, okay. So that's correct. Okay, but it's like your income tax return. You're filing in 2014, but the information is your 2013. Okay. Okay. Okay, so question, what about part of the year employees? Okay, so if you have a new employee that starts with your organization, let's say mid-year, let's say you're you know, somebody retires and you fill that position and they have to file an FDS, requirements are that, you know, you would add them to the roster immediately, and then that LGO has 30 days to file their information. So the sooner you get them on the roster and get them their PIN number, the quicker they are able to go in, establish their account, and file their FDS. So again, for those employees that start mid-year, that's what you would do there. Let's go next question. Is there an as-of date thinking to use December 31st, but what about someone who left the organization in November? Okay. Again, if they have left, Chris, I'm going to defer this to you. If they're not part of the organization in the new year, are they still required to file?
No.
Okay. Okay.
Year of service.
Because I mean, practically speaking, there's no way to compel that person and to have jurisdiction over that person once they're no longer your local government officer. They have to be a local government officer at the time of in the new year, in the filing year.
Mark, this is Eileen. I was at the training at the Clerks Association. So year of service includes the year of service that the person is a local government officer using the 2013 financial information that they would have used to file their taxes. Presumably, if somebody was in office in November, they filed for the previous year. So presumably we have their form already for 2013. If they leave in October or November, they're no longer serving their local government agency. And that just goes back to what Chris just said. So then it's the new people in January filing, for people who get newly appointed for that current year of service. That's what the year of service means, just for the purposes of the clerks out there who might not have clarification on that.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Eileen. Okay. And then one last question here was from Teresa. You know, and I asked, you know, if you could just let us know, Teresa, what organization you're from. It seems that, you know, she's the one who handles the FDS in her organization, and she would like the communication, Chris. So I don't know if you just maybe want to reach out to her and talk to her, but, you know, she can respond to what, you know, town or where she's from. Oh, Newton. You know, maybe we can, you know, figure out if she could be the the information in the system. But again, like Chris had said, initially they're taking the GovConnect list, and that's the information they're starting with. So, you know, like I said, I would just talk to the clerk if we can't get that changed by that time, or it can't be done. So just keep that in mind.
We're kind of at that point, so let me give you my phone number so you can give me a call and we'll talk about it. 609-633-3610.
Chris, give me that again. 609.
633. 3610.
Okay, that's fine. I'm just going to.
And that's for that person that had that particular issue.
Sure. Yep. So, okay, good. So those are all the questions that we have. We've gone through all our questions. Again, if there's anybody else, I will stay on for another minute or two. Question came up. Where do we put the 3 code words? I believe that's going to be on that form, that CEU form that you fill out and going to submit. You need to list those 3 code words somewhere on that form. I don't know if there's a specific section, Chris, or maybe we lost Chris. Okay, so I think there might be a section on that form. I'm not exactly sure. A couple other questions that are coming in real quick. Will the town be notified of any person who does not file the required FDSO to determine they would continue to serve on a volunteer board or commission? Again, the notification will be the automatic notification on your roster. There's going to be no emails or anything like that you know comes through. I know Chris has said in the past that it's not the clerk's responsibility to babysit the LGOs. So it's, you know, it's definitely dependent on them to file and, you know, file on time. But again, you know, you'll have to, you know, I guess internally discuss that. And I think I maybe lost Chris, so I apologize, Eileen.
We're here.
Oh, you're there. Oh,
Yeah.
so the question was, will the town be notified of any person who does not file the required FDS, so to determine they would not continue to serve?
No.
Well, first of all, we won't have to contact anybody because you'll be able to see your roster by logging in, and you'll be able to see whether they filed or not, because that box will either say yes or no. So that's not going to be necessary. And secondly, I'm not aware, but we do have somebody from the local finance board here. I'm not aware that not filing is a bar to continuous service on the planning board or whatever. It usually ends up in an ethics complaint. It doesn't necessarily disbar that person from continuing to serve on the planning board, to my knowledge.
So typically what happens in a case like that is that if a complaint comes in and you have an individual who's required to file and they repeatedly fail to file year after year, if we determine that, or we request the information and they fail to comply, then the local finance board can find that person in violation of the law and can make a recommendation to the council to have them removed from the board or commission that they sit on. But we can't tell them that we can't remove anybody from a board. We can make a recommendation.
And I don't think there's anything in the statute that says failure to
Yes, it does.
submit. It does? I
Yeah.
stand corrected. So there's a process. There's a process for it.
Yeah. So okay. So I hope that answered that question. So I think that's pretty much it. Again, a couple questions about where to put the words that you gave out. I think it's in part 2 of the continuing education form. That's where you would list your words. Just in case anybody's still on that needed to know that. And somebody was asking for an email, DCA email, Grace. I'm sorry. She said from the email that you got from the GovConnect email from DCA relating about the credits. That's where you can find the information on how to fill out that form. So, okay, good. So I think that's it. I guess anybody has any other questions? We're pretty much done, for everything. I think all the questions have been answered so far. Good. Okay. Just checking some last comments coming in here just to make sure we don't have any other last questions. Again, what we're going to try to do is this webinar has been recorded along with the one earlier today. We are going to try to convert that and put that on some site. We just need to find where we're going to host that. And then information will be sent out. So if you need to review that webinar again, you'll be able to do that at some point in time. So I want to thank everybody for joining us today. I want to thank Chris and the folks from the DCA for being on today's call. Again, I think everybody's excited, for the new system. I think it's a new system. There's going to be a little bit of a learning curve, but I think overall, I think everybody should find it very intuitive and a lot easier to utilize, than the previous system. So, again, if anybody has any questions, we will be posting information on once the website is up and running on, if you have any technical problems or whatever, who you need to contact and so on and so forth. So, again, I thank you for joining us today and hope to talk to everybody soon. So I'm just going to hang on here for a few more minutes in case anybody has any last questions, but for the most part, we're pretty much done for today. Thank you.